I feel like we go through the same narrative with DeBrusque, where I think he's playing a really strong two-way game, but of course, like, dude needs to score. And I think if you're the Bruins, you're trying to stay the course here because he's still doing enough that he's not like you got to take him out of the lineup or he's hurting your overall product on the ice. But you're just hoping that he finally starts, that shooting percentage starts going the other way and he starts burying more of these chances. And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 190, presented by CLNS Media and sponsored by our good friends over at Factor Meals and FanDuel. My name is Conor Ryan. As you can see, going solo today. It's the week after Christmas, right before New Year's. As I'm sure most of you can attest to, not a lot going on right now. We're taking it easy. If you're working this week, you're not getting overexerted with stuff. You're letting those worries and troubles go over into 2024. So we're keeping it pretty low key in this episode. We're not having Evan or Ty or anyone on board. You're stuck with me for this one as I ferry you into the new year. So we figured with this new episode, what better time to once again bring back one of our mailbags where you guys send in questions related to anything with the Bruins, and I do what I can to answer them. So thankfully, for everyone who did send in a few questions, a lot of them related to probably the biggest news of today as we're recording on Friday, which is Georgi Merkulov getting called up. We kind of saw you could read the tea leaves that he was most likely going to get called up. Only reason why the Bruins didn't do it yesterday is because I believe the team, Providence, was in Utica, so they wanted to wait for them to get back before sending Merkulov here. But we touched on it quite a bit on our latest episode that I recorded with Evan, but we'll kind of delve a little bit more into what his role is with this team over these next couple of weeks, which you guys sent along those kind of questions. So without further ado, how about we just dive right into it with our first question, which is from Ice Frog, who says, "Hi, Connor. The Bruins call up Merkulov, try him out in a top six role. Who do you think is the most likely to move down in the lineup? Who do you think is most likely to move out of the lineup? Also, would they use Merkulov at center or wing?" First of all, thanks for the question, Ice Frog. And yeah, I think you kind of saw the Bruins approach based on what we saw during lines on Friday at Warrior Ice Arena, which is Merkulov, for the time being at least, is more or less going to slot into the vacancy with where Matt Poitras is on the third line. So Merkulov was third line center next to Frederick and JVR as of Friday. And as a result, Steen bumps out of the lineup, and then Danton Heinen moves down to the fourth line with Lauko and Beecher. So that seems to be the plan starting off here. And I like it in terms of, one, you're putting Merkulov in his natural spot. He can play wing, but he's probably at his best as a centerman. And you're putting him with two guys. It's not like you're putting him with Pastrnak or DeBrusque or anything like that, but two, capable NHL veterans who can do a lot of damage, especially around the net front, which is where Merkulov is really, really good. Even at his age, with his lack of experience, really poised with the puck, knows when to bring the puck into grade A ice and can do a lot of damage there. So I like that they're starting off by putting him in that spot. See if he can drive play further down the lineup, which is, I think, what you're hoping for. What he can bring is kind of this mid-season spark with this offense right now. And again, it's a good problem to have, right? I don't imagine this is going to be a situation where he's up here for good. Listen, if he goes and puts up 7 points in 5 games, then yeah, you change your opinion on it. But I think, especially with Poitras out for at least probably another week, maybe a little bit more while he's over at World Juniors, doesn't hurt to put in another young player like Merkulov in that spot. At the very least, get him up in the NHL, learn some experience, and see how he does there. And if he still has some seasoning to do, which is to be expected for any young player, as soon as Poitras comes back, you can either send him down, or if he's playing at a high level, you got a good problem on your hands. Maybe Poitras moves to the wing. Maybe Merkulov moves to the wing. If you've got two rookies in your bottom six, along with a third guy with Beecher, who are all carving out established roles on this team, that's a great problem to have. So I kind of see that being their approach, at least out of the gate, with Merkulov in this maybe 5-6 game kind of trial size that they kind of have for him, where they want to see whether he can drive play in Poitras' spot. And then if he rolls with it and the time comes for Poitras to come back, you kick that can a little bit down the road because, again, that's a good problem to have. So thank you again for the question, Ice Frog. We turn next to Ryan. Great last name, even though it's your first name, I guess. But Ryan asked, Seidenberg and Chara played together despite both being same-handed. Why not come to playoffs, play Carlo and McAvoy together, and let them ride for 35 minutes a night? Thanks for the question, Ryan. It's definitely a intriguing option to have for the Bruins. I mean, listen, you mentioned Seidenberg and Chara. I think most Bruins fans would kill to have a pairing like that again in terms of playing 27, 28 minutes a night, shut down defense. I mean, well, I think we all know the usual suspects that played a key role in that 2011 team with Chara and Bergeron and what have you, but Mark Recchi, Horton. But I think Seidenberg's right up there. He was a monster throughout that playoff run. And I can get the appeal of maybe putting your two probably best defensemen this year, especially I think Carlo's been money all season long. But um, I think the biggest issue there is beyond the fact that I think Montgomery is pretty keen on balancing and having, different options there with guys that are, different shots in those spots. I still think they want to keep it more balanced in terms of their top four, where they can have two very, rather than having maybe one mega pairing, you can have two damn good, pairings. Like, it's not to say that, on paper at least, McAvoy with whoever, whether it's Grizzly, who hasn't really been playing at a high level, or Lori, that can be a really good pairing in and of itself. And then Carlo and Lindholm last year were arguably the best shutdown pair in the league. And I know Lindholm really hasn't had a strong start to the year, but I was really encouraged by what you saw from him on Wednesday against Buffalo, where uh, looked like kind of the Lindholm of old. Again, didn't have any points, but you saw how assertive he was with the puck. He was killing plays, aggressive without putting himself out in bad spots, making really quick tap passes, getting the puck out of the Bruins defensive zone. So uh, I still think for right now, at least, barring continued struggles for those key cogs like a Lindholm or a Grizzly, I still think Montgomery wants to keep those guys kind of separated out there and, you know, rather have a really, really strong top four as opposed to a really top heavy top pairing when, again, you need pretty much everyone to pull on the rope come the postseason. So thank you for the question, Ryan. We turn next to Moonlight Graham. Great film. Makes many men cry. Moonlight Graham asks, toughness, and are we going to get any? Great question, Moonlight. Uh, Listen, it is definitely going to be, I think, a work in progress in terms of finding. And again, I say toughness. I think what this team needs, especially in today's NHL, is tone setters. I think that's something where whether this team is fallen into a rut, they're in a critical game where all of a sudden you have a stretch there where you need a response, whether it's a heavy hit, a fight, what have you. I think you saw in that game against Minnesota right before the holidays with Lauko, where Bruins give up a goal to Johansson on the power play. Immediately, Lauko drops the gloves. You guys get a spark from that. And then the Bruins score while Lauko's in the box. Like, I think you need more responses like that. Again, listen, you'll take a guy who's going to land 10 hits a night, of course. But I think that the lack of not response, but the lack of just guys that can have that momentum shifting play that's not a tangible goal or what have you. Like, I think you see every time in the postseason, there's at least one game where McAvoy has one of those heavy hits. It kind of changes the complexion of a game, but it can't just be him. It can't just be him. It can't just be, I think Frederick's done a pretty good job at, answering the bell when needed. And I think Lauko, now that he's finally been cleared to fight, I'm sure you're going to see him kind of muck it up a lot more here. But I think it needs to be a lot more of those kind of guys buying in, delivering a big hit when needed, and kind of setting the tone when the situation arises. Again, in a perfect situation, you'd have a guy like Lucic here to do that. I don't see that being the case anymore. So you got to have to make do with what you have on this roster, and then you kind of see what other options are out there. Whether it's, I don't know if you're going to be relinquishing draft assets to get like a few years ago when like Delorier was a guy that players coveted, or even like a Hathaway. Maybe that's a situation when the Bruins view it as, rather than spending premium assets to get a Lindholm or a top defenseman, maybe it's a situation where you get like a fourth line established veteran guy that can maybe make more of an impact on the fourth line with a few younger guys like Lauko and Bicho, and see how that kind of maps out. So I could see that. I know Ty Anderson and I mentioned like picking up maybe really affordable free agents, like a guy like Wayne Simmons. Listen, he's pretty cooked, but if you want to bring him on for a league minimum, bring him on the roster and just have him as kind of a physical deterrent, maybe that's an avenue you take. So it is something that I think needs to be addressed on this team, whether it's internally or going and finding a guy at an affordable value to add to that team. But it is something that you just want to see a little bit more. Again, maybe not overall pushback or guys that can beat the brakes off of players, but players that can respond and change the momentum of a game beyond just a dangle and a snipe in the offensive zone. So I think that is something this team definitely has to keep tabs on as this year goes on. So good question, Moonlight. And before we go on to our next set of questions here, we're going to take a brief break and listen to our good friends over at FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can bet on everything from spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And frankly, that's the best part about FanDuel, that you can bet on anything. You want to bet on how many touchdowns Mac Jones is going to throw this year? Be my guest. Maybe how many goals David Pastrnak is going to score. Go for it. You can really do it all. So bet now on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, next question is from Brian, who asked, given the lack of point production from Jake DeBrusk, what's a realistic deal for him look like? And any chance he and the Bees can find some common ground on that, or will he land elsewhere? Great question, Brian. Again, it is probably the most consequential thing in terms of internally on this roster is getting DeBrusk back playing at a high level. I think you should be encouraged by what you saw on Wednesday in Buffalo. I think that was one of his best games of the year. Gets two assists on Coyle's goals. First multi-point game of the season for him, which is crazy to think about. But beyond that, looked really engaged. Did more of the stuff that we've seen all year, which is he's moving his feet, being active, but finally gets rewarded with some tangible points, which is hopefully a step in the right direction. And again, I still think this is a situation where I don't know where exactly the best value is for DeBrusk, right, in terms of a deal, because he's not a guy that I think you want to sell short on or just move for the sake of thinking that, all right, you don't want to pay him, get anything for him when, again, he's shooting, I think, 5% this season. It's like, 8 or 9% below his career average. Like, would you rather stay the course with a guy who's still being a solid 2A player that is, the law of averages say he's due for a heater at some point? Again, I think we can probably throw out the 30 goal prediction that I think I had from earlier on this year. But if he heats up and ends the year with 22 goals and continues to play really good 2A hockey, I think you'd rather keep that than selling him for, whatever the return will be. Because again, I think he has value, even if he is a pending free agent on the trade market. But for the kind of guys that you want to move him for, right? Like you want to move him for a guy like a Elias Lindholm or a, Noah Hannafin, one of these guys that can really impact this team, that if you're moving a guy like DeBrusk off, makes it worth your while. I can't see a team like Calgary being someone that necessarily covets a guy who's 27, is a good player, but as a pending free agent, does DeBrusk really want to go to Calgary, where that team seems like it's lined for a longer rebuild? Facilities don't really get rave reviews from other players and other teams across the league. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily a team that wants him. A team that probably wants DeBrusk is a team like, the Avalanche or a contending team that wants a little bit more of a scoring punch and think that he can break through with them, right? Like, I don't know what you're getting from a team like the Avalanche that makes it worth what, DeBrusk can and should be, right, with this team. So again, I feel like we go through the same narrative with DeBrusk, where I think he's playing a really strong 2A game, but of course, dude needs to score. And I think if you're the Bruins, you're trying to stay the course here, because he's still doing enough that he's not like you got to take him out of the lineup or he's hurting your overall product on the ice. But you're just hoping that he finally starts, that shooting percentage starts going the other way and he starts burying more of these chances, because I still think he's an important part of this team. And I think the Bruins ideally want to keep him. But it will be fascinating to see what's going to happen when, the time comes for that contract. Because if you told me before the year, I was looking more at that Brendan Hagel contract as kind of the common ground there. If it ends up being like 5 million or something like that for a long-term deal for DeBrusque, I think if you're the Bruins, you probably jump on it, because even if he's not a 30-goal guy, but is a good two-way player that plays 16, 17 minutes a night, can give you 20 goals, ideally 20 plus. I still think there's some pretty good value there for what he brings to this team. So definitely something worth keeping tabs on. Once again, thanks for the question, Brian. We move on now to Rob Plawinski, who asks, best game for Freddie last night versus Buffalo. Line changes for top 9, best they've looked in a couple of weeks, which I agree. Should they keep him at center? Thanks for the question, Rob. I think for right now, I think Frederick has done a pretty solid job playing down the middle. Again, it's his natural position, so he's has no qualms with doing it. I still think ideally the Bruins want to keep him at wing. It's something that we've discussed multiple times, both during training camp and the start of the year, where Frederick kind of best fits. And it seems like Montgomery and the Bruins are more inclined to keeping him at wing. I think in spurts, he can do a very good job down the middle, but it seems like for Montgomery's approach, the most important thing is keeping Frederick playing a simplified game, right? When he tries to either do too much or gets kind of caught up in a lot of the, you know, greater details of playing at center. Sometimes he can kind of get away from his game or tries doing too much. And I think we've all seen now at this point with Frederick, when he's at his best, when he's playing really simple hockey, getting to the front of the net. Again, knowing guys, but not going out of his way to do it, kind of letting the chaos kind of come to him. That's usually how I think he's at his best, as opposed to maybe earlier on in his career when he was kind of like a heat-seeking missile trying to get under the skin of opponents. So I think ideally they want to keep him at wing. That's where I think he saw most of his success last year. It just depends on who's going to be a centerman, right? Because again, Coyle's done a really good job this year, but I still love when he plays with Frederick. I think that's a really, really strong pairing in terms of building out your roster. But who knows if Merkulov plays well with him or Poitras comes back energized. I think they still want to keep him on the wing and have him kind of playing that simplified hockey that really benefited him and the Bruins last year. So thanks for the question, Rob. We go next to CJ Kelly, who asks, once the World Juniors is over, how will the Bruins determine if Poitras had a good tournament and they got what they wanted by sending him? Time on ice, points, playing on both sides of the puck, leadership? And you also ask, if Merck is brought back and stays, what happens to the lineup once Poitras is back? So good question, CJ. I think for the Bruins, it's all about confidence, right? I think for them, you saw with Poitras earlier on this year when he was kind of accelerating his timeline and stamping his spot in this lineup. A lot of it had to do with just how poised and confident he was with the puck, even as a 19-year-old. And it's not to say that he's that's been few and far between, but you've had less games where he's had these really dominant shifts where he doesn't look like a 19-year-old out there, right? Where he's making guys miss up high, holding onto the puck, winning board battles, and bringing the puck into grade A ice and letting his natural talent take over. And I think for them, that's how they're going to weigh just how much he's built off of this experience of World Juniors, where he's a top line center. He's helping Team Canada hopefully, take home a medal there during that tournament. And I think if you're playing with confidence and poise, all the other stuff plays out, right? Like you're playing confident, you're going to get more ice time. You're going to naturally get more points. You're going to improve both sides of your overall game and work on your 200-foot game. So I think for them, that's the biggest key. I think confidence is the most important thing that they're hoping to kind of re-spark with him going into this second half of the year and give him a little bit more juice going into this kind of grueling stretch of the season. And if he's playing confidently, all the rest of that stuff's gonna to show itself, right? Like it's not like a guy who's not confident all of a sudden is gonna go on a heater. He's going to all of a sudden start averaging 15 plus minutes a night. Like I think once you're playing to your strengths and feeling good about your game, the rest kind of solves itself. And then if when Poitras comes back and Merkulov's still up here, it's a great problem to have, right? Then all of a sudden you're looking at, does a guy like Lauko or Heinen slot out of the lineup and you push a guy down there. I still think whether it's Merkulov or Poitras, that can be a lot of intrigue there as to one of those guys moving to the wing. And all of a sudden you've got a bottom six that has a lot of young talent that if they're proving their worth up here, you got a pretty good situation on your hands, not just for this year in terms of that offensive upside, but especially in the years ahead. Because I think, especially with a guy like Merkulov, has been a really pleasant surprise because you look at Obviously, Patra, no one expected him to be a 19-year-old guy up in the NHL, but Merkulov's a guy that we've heard the script on him for a long time now, right? Where it's really offensively gifted, had a lot to work on defensively, and all the credit to him, he's made a lot of strides in that department. So, again, I don't think he's going to be winning any Selkies in the future, but if Merkulov can be a steady two-way player and that offensive instincts that has made him such a coveted prospect can play out at the NHL level, you got a very good player in your hands if you're the Bruins. All right, thanks for the question, CJ. As we kind of go into the final stretch here, let's take another brief break. Hear from our good friends over at Factor Meals.
This holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up fast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while tackling all your holiday to-dos. Too busy with holiday plans to cook, but want to make sure you're eating well? With Factor, skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you'll need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you need to do is heat and enjoy. This November, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/poke50 and use code POKE50, that's POKE 50, to get 50% off. That's code POKE50 at factormeals.com/poke50 to get 50% off.
Shout out once again to our friends over at Factor Meals. All right, we have quite a few questions, so we'll kind of wrap it up with these last two here. So, one from Nathan Rowe, who asks, do you think Laura has done enough to stay in Boston when Grizz and Forbort are healthy? Great question, Nathan. And it's definitely, I think, something that if you asked me back in November when he was sent down the first time, I'd be like, I really like Lorai's game. I can see the potential. You've got a potential top 4 stalwart on your hands, but I think when you look at his defensive game, still a lot to work on there that I wouldn't be so confident in putting him in there. Again, got guys that are injured, without a doubt. First guy up, you want him playing minutes when needed up here. But now I think I don't know if I'm ready to fully say that he deserves to stay up here full time yet, but I think what I've been really encouraged with so far over this kind of second stint he's been with the team is that the defensive game has been a lot improved. And again, not to say that it's perfect. Again, the guy is switched to defense when he was 17 years old. He is already plays a position that needs a lot of refinement, has a really long development curve, and he's already, kind of playing catch up in terms of just the amount of years and reps he's had. So I think patience has to be prescribed with a guy like Lorai, but all the credit to him. This is a player that if you listen to our podcast earlier on this year, we were talking about Lorai being like, hey, great prospect, a really intriguing guy. I mean, 6'5", offensive defenseman, not a lot out there that have that profile, but give him a full year in Providence, let him learn the ropes and check back in 2024, see if he's ready. He accelerated his timeline with a really strong preseason, showed his potential at spurts during that first stint. But then, in the second time up with Boston now, defensive game's been a whole lot better. Bruins were outscored by opponents 13-7 when Lorai was on the ice over those first 12 games. Last 6 games he's been back up here, Bruins have outscored teams 5-1. So that's a sign of, I think, a really good young player. When obviously the potential, the talent's there, we all know that. But when you have a young player that can hit those, expected bumps in the road and can immediately learn from it, not just over the span of a year, but over a month or so in terms of making those corrections, that's very encouraging to see. So I'm still not ready quite yet. Again, it all comes down to how healthy guys like Grizzly and Forbort are. I think that's been the case all year. I think Forbort's had a really, really good season as well. So I can't see him being a guy that'll be the odd man out. We know how good he is on the PK, but his 5-on-5 numbers have been really, really good so far this season as well. Grzelcyk's kind of the wild card, right? Because when he's healthy, he still has a lot of value to this team, especially when he's with McAvoy. Just hasn't been the case this year. So if he's back eventually in the lineup, Grzelcyk, and the results still aren't there, especially with McAvoy when, those two are playing at a high level together, they're one of the best pairings in the league, at least during the regular season. If those returns still aren't really there, then that's when I think you give Laura an extended look. So I think they're going to give Grizzly a long leash once he's back healthy to kind of reset and reassert his value to this team in the lineup. But if the returns aren't there in just a few weeks or months down the road, I could see it being the situation where maybe a guy like Lorite does leapfrog him, especially if Lorite continues to make these strides defensively. So thanks for the question, Nathan. And our last one is a question from Mama Kars, who asks, what is Jake DeBrusk's future with the Bruins? Production seems down this year, although he looked good last game. And you also have a follow-up. So we kind of talked about DeBrusk's future. I still think ideally the Bruins want to keep him on board. I think Montgomery's been pleased with his overall two-way game. He's not doing enough to take him out of the lineup, right? Like he's still not costing you games, I would say, but there's been a lot of times where an extra goal or two from DeBrusk would either get you a win outright or would save you from a few of these white knuckle third periods where you're frantically protecting a 1-goal lead. You're expending energy in November and December. And that's been huge for this team is you just haven't gotten that necessary scoring depth to put you over the top in some of these situations. So I think ideally they want to keep him. Again, like in terms of a trade, I just don't know what you're going to get as a proper return for a pending free agent for a team that wants him long term or targets him this year, like a contending team, and you're going to get a return that maximizes what the value is for giving up a top 6 guy that should be in your lineup for the foreseeable future. So again, what's that next contract going to be? It's going to be the big question because you hope that, I think for the Bruins' sake, that he gets on a bit of a heater here in the second half, and hopefully that game against the Sabres is a bit of a jumping off point for him. But I think ideally they want to keep him here long term and view him as a guy that can give you 20 goals in most seasons once his shooting percentage doesn't go in the tank as it's been this year. But I think that they still view him as a really strong two-way guy that you can pencil into your top 6 grouping for the foreseeable future. So I think ideally they want to keep him here. It just depends on what that contract's going to be. And then your follow-up is, who hands out the chicken wings during post-game interviews? Great question. I know the last time the Bruins were in Buffalo last season, and Swayman was eating buffalo wings during his interview. I believe it was Olmark, a guy who spent a few years in Buffalo. I'm sure knows quite a few good spots to grab some wings there. I think he was the one giving out the wings last time. Couldn't confirm this most recent one, who it was, but if I had to guess, I would assume it'd be a guy who's got those Buffalo ties like Olmark is once again doing that again. So maybe that's a running trend whenever they make it to Buffalo, which seems like probably a highlight of that trip if you're going up there. So no disrespect to Buffalo, but you guys know. Anyway, that will wrap up our latest episode 190 of Poke the Bear. Again, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for those who sent in their questions. Again, as we go into the new year, we can't thank you guys enough for all of your support, whether it's speaking for myself, Evan, Ty, everyone who takes part in these podcasts on both Poke the Bear and Bruins Beat. We can't do it without you guys and your support. So once again, thank you all for listening, reading our stuff, tweeting at us, all that stuff. It really is appreciated for everything that we do. And we love the opportunity we have to connect with you guys and to cover this great sport. So once again, thank you all so much for listening on this latest episode. I will see you all in 2024.